I had been a very big supporter of the Friends of Liberty State Park and thought that they were doing some wonderful things. With the evidence that has come out now, I'm seeing that I was deceived, and I think it's necessary in order for this park to live up to its full potential that we follow up on some of the history and see where it's applicable now as we go into a new era for the United States.
All right, you talked a little bit about the deception and the history. Can you go in a little bit about, because there seems to be an issue that's been coming up as far as, certain land hasn't been remediated or, wasn't done up to a certain level, and, what, activities should have been going on in the park based off of this old master plan. Can you give me like a basic idea of that? Because I've heard a lot of stuff out there. If you can give me, and the viewers a general idea.
What's interesting is that in the late 70s, they had a master plan as a result of everybody coming together and really thinking about what they wanted to do with Liberty Park in its infancy. As the years went on, that master plan was kind of girded up, and then at some point it sort of got buried. More and more it was removed from the public eye, whereas before it was actually circulated around in the public in order to make people aware of it. And finding out about it, that master plan entailed a whole bunch of things that would really make Liberty State Park the sort of world-class venue that it should be. We're right here off the water on one side. On the other side, it's plenty of land that could, be used very, very viably for not just the community, but for the state of New Jersey. And the reason that it is not is because Friends of Liberty State Park have, worked diligently to make sure that nothing else changed in the park. And unfortunately, that nothing is continuing to poison a large, significant amount of this land. And the impact of that is not something that, I'm willing to sit here and watch. And now that I know about it, it's certainly not something I'm going to sit here and let happen.
As far as, what's holding it back from being that world-class park that you're talking about, can you talk just anything in specific as far as like activities, or there were certain plans that, people would be able to see if they actually came to fruition?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's really interesting. Here we are, we're sitting in the park. This is one of the more used pieces of it. It's got a picnic tables and all that sort of thing back there, and a small swing set that I guess the kids can use if they like. That is pretty much the totality of the recreation that you have here in Liberty State Park. If you want to do an exercise path, you can do that, but I don't know that that is the sort of thing that would really generate the sort of engagement that a national park or even a state park is supposed to do. What we found in this master plan was that there were provisions for amphitheaters, pools, recreation, courts, basketball courts, baseball fields, playing fields. I think they had a water park in there, a whole bunch of things that would really be interesting. Now, mind you, it has to be re-examined. It's not a matter of just taking that and putting in today. We have to, that was something that a bunch of people from the past had agreed to based upon the standards of the past, quite frankly. It would have to be modernized, it would have to be updated, it would have to be discussed, because one of the greatest mistakes that I think we have seen, particularly when we're dealing with legacy kind of organizations like the Friends of Lifers, is that the Friends of Liberty State Park, they are not interested in changing. They are interested in keeping things as they are. They have played this role as conservators when they are actually conservatives. It is not a matter of trying to save the park. It is a matter of keeping things the way they are for their advantage. And that's a difficulty. That's a difficulty in this time, and it's a difficulty in this century.
So you speak about their advantage. Just in general, besides, I guess there is an ideological element that goes into how they're operating the park. But is there anything that you could point to that says, the Friends of Liberty State Park or SAM or some kind of entity connected to them are benefiting from a lack of new development or activity within the park?
Well, I think that it is an interesting coincidence that as these conservators of Liberty State Park, they decry the fact that there is no, or rather there's going to be privatization of the park. That as a result of the things that we're doing, it will become a private park and it'll be taken over from the state. That's interesting because what has happened and what is happening is private and public partnerships. No entity in Liberty State Park that is owned by the state is even open. The restaurants, the two most expensive restaurants in Liberty State Park, also in Jersey City, they're in Liberty State Park and they're open. The shipping yards where millionaires are leaving their yachts, those are open. And again, a private and public partnership. And the interesting coincidence is that Friends of Liberty State Park are the only ones who've really benefited from doing fundraisers there for 20 years. No one else has had that sort of foothold and able to be getting the places for the discounts that they are getting is being supported by these organizations. It is very interesting that, he will decry some millionaire pretty much as a smokescreen, since the man has not got anything to do with what we're doing, in the sense of he's not paying for it, he's not, instructing us. What he has done is give us the information. And I think in doing that, it caused a stir in the individuals who have been here and who've kind of not known about it, a stir in the individuals who haven't been here and who found out about it. And now what we're trying to see is a stir in the community, because it would be one thing if these were not possible. It would even be another thing if these were not happening or not true. But these were things that were happening. These are things that are true. And these are things that have not been told to us. And given the fact that, Friends of Liberty State Park has the longest history in terms of organizations related to it, it becomes a little suspect as to not only why they are fighting the effort to clean up, an effort to conserve, repair, and build the same park that they supposedly love, but that they never knew about this. Sam and his family have been involved with this park for more than 2 decades. I would be interested to see exactly, why he has not found out about this. What kind of forces were against him such that he didn't bring this to fruition.
So kind of on a two-part course. So as far as Sam and Friends of Liberty State Park, it's almost that, with the small private operations that are already public-private operations that are already going on in Liberty State Park, he's kind of living almost a bougie lifestyle off of these small, wealthy, partnerships that are going on is something that you would say as far as his benefit by pretty much not having any action going on in the park.
Yeah, pretty much. In terms of the bougie lifestyle, I would think bourgeoisie in the sense of an attitude or arrogance that comes with thinking that you are the only sole person able to make those decisions, capable, even credible in terms of making those decisions. And I think that might be the bourgeoisie part of it.
You talked a little bit about, you didn't say him by name, but you talked a little bit, you referenced Mr. Fireman. Obviously, you had a situation, we're going to talk a little bit about how the media has kind of dealt with this story. But my whole thing is, has it gotten to the point, I guess, with Mr. Fireman, he's a billionaire, or a multi-millionaire he's somewhere in that realm of wealth. Is it become a demonization thing where it's just that, obviously he has an interest with more holes there and, his membership and whatnot, and that's its own thing. But, him coming to the idea that he's coming to, the black community of Jersey City, the South Side communities that have not been a part of, I guess, all of these conversations, has he been a good, I guess, I'm trying to have a hard time asking this question. Has he been a positive influence on this whole situation, or has this been something where he's just become negative because of demonization about him?
I think that the interesting part about this is that, to my understanding, Mr. Fireman's involvement ended when he took the whole Cave and Point off of the table, and that happened because of the controversy in terms of what to do and all of this, people saying that he was trying to privatize and all of that. So fine, that's off the table. But in giving us this information, he did one of two things. One, he made us aware that there was a fight to be had, and that this was the ammunition that you needed. Now, as far as his personal involvement, not really. What he has done is made it very viable for us to kind of get the kind of sponsorship we need from the foundation, which has been limited. But quite frankly, until we actually show that this work can be done and it's a possibility, it's always going to be limited. In terms of his reputation, people don't know who he is. I, quite frankly, have never met him. The only reason I have any knowledge of him is because of seeing the work that he did in Newark. When Mr. Fireman was ill, he needed to get a heart transplant. He did so at the Beth Israel in Newark. That was I guess a revelation for him, because as a result of that, he not only made contributions to the hospital, he made contributions to that community. That I know firsthand as a result of living in Newark and knowing the Newark, nonprofit scene, so to speak. So in that, I found credibility. When I heard about what was going on here in Jersey City and they mentioned him, I found credibility in what was given to us, because I had already heard about him in a situation that had nothing to do with me, nothing to do with him. It was simply his actions. And I've always believed that actions speak louder than words.
My question, I guess, is there inherently something, we talk about public-private partnerships, and it seems like, there's obviously extremes on both ends and whatnot of either one side, especially on the private end, sometimes getting very sweetheart deals in public-private partnerships. But is there something inherently wrong with the idea that, let's say the Cave and Point does get put back on the table, and that's where these three holes are theoretically in this spot that Sam Pesin, Friends of Liberty State Park, will fight to the death. But if there's some kind of community agreement and a massive community give back for that piece of land, is that inherently, is that inherently wrong? Is that an evil thing, or is that a bad thing, or should, where does that go in as far as consideration?
As far as our consideration, there is nothing inherently wrong about that. What's inherently wrong is shutting down the conversation before you even have it. Like I said, I'd worked with foundations before where individuals, who have some means have been able to do some things that most people would not be able to do. When you know the people that are doing it and you know the spirit of what they are doing, then it's easier to follow what they are doing. I have not seen anything in what he has done to vilify. And again, as conservatives rather than conservators, they're taking it out of the basic conservative playbook in terms of attacking those who are going to oppose them, attacking those who might actually have influence against what they are doing.
Speaking of the attacks, as this has played out in the media, there was this infamous Zoom call that didn't go, I guess, as planned. And more recently, you had an interview with NJ12 that almost seemed like, I don't know if you were ever asked anything of relevance other than to say, oh, you're with Paul Fireman somehow. How do you see that the way that the media has handled this, and do you feel that there's been a balanced approach to it, or do they just have, that type of influence with the mainstream media sources?
They have that sort of influence with the mainstream media sources. I remember I got a call from Jersey Journal, and well-meaning individual was a reporter, very professional. We took about 10, 15 minutes. All the questions he asked me were about Cave and Point. When I told him that I didn't know about that, he questioned how could he have gotten my name? How come when he called the golf club, they knew who I was? How come everybody says that we have something to do with it if we're saying we don't? And I'm like, because that's the way you guys work. Now, whether or not it was a matter of him making stuff up in order to get response, or trying to sincerely believing that I had something to do with whatever he was questioning, it doesn't really matter. I think that one of the another rule of the conservative playbook is to distract. Have you looking here while they do what they're doing here. Now, while everybody is worried about whatever it is that Sam is saying about me and the organization, organization. We are worried about making sure that the things that he is trying to execute under the cloak of darkness are actually put to light. So, for example, when he went through his histrionics of how much he supported the idea of diversity and inclusion for the Protection Act, it looked very good. But then he walked out and he and his crew started the work in terms of trying to get Trenton to pass a similar act without including the community, without talking about it, and without anybody knowing. So, this is a conservative play action. It is not a conservator play action. And until we get the people to understand that, like the Republican convention we just saw, a whole bunch of people that are very, very vocal and very communicative are denying the reality in order to maintain something that they're comfortable with, we're going to have an issue. And that's what we're going to focus on. Rather than focusing on trying to retort to every allegation that they make up, we're going to focus on making sure that the legislation isn't passed.
So I guess kind of on the other end of that, the Jersey Journal just came out with a recent article. I believe you were talking about, as far as that interview, was NJ12, not the Jersey Journal.
Okay.
It was a Zoom call.
Exactly. See, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
I got you. But anyhow, so the Jersey Journal just came out with something this week where it was about, and now they're kind of saying that on your side, you guys are, I guess, race baiting to a certain extent, saying that, there wasn't black voices there wasn't diversity all these years, and now they're coming back, and now the Jersey Journal, it seems like, once again, another kind of very one-sided perspective of things, brought in one woman, I can't think of her name right now, that she had been involved with Friends of Liberty State Park for some time, and then they brought in another person that was a friend of Sam Pesin. How do you see that, and what is like the liberal playbook then? If there's a conservative playbook, what's the liberal playbook for, improving the situation at Liberty State Park?
Well, here's the problem with the liberal playbook. I'm really not a liberal, so I don't know it. What I do know is communication and how to reveal a liar. So those are the things that I can focus on because I actually have skills with that. In terms of liberalism, I think liberalism is too often an excuse for you to get what you want by pretending to agree with people. And I don't have any more time for that than I do for conservatism. I'm looking to unite people who are authentic in their intention, transparent in their actions, and truthful in all that they're doing. Now, we understand people will fall. We understand people will make mistakes. But I think the key to all of that is conversation, actually listening to people, and then moving forward from there. Now, in terms of our first foray with the hosting of the Zoom meeting, what was interesting about that, and again, from the conservative playbook, when I invited Sam to do that, he said no. And I asked him if he was sure. He said no. I didn't get a response. 3 days, I told him that I could only get a response from him within a certain amount of time because then I was off the races to doing some other things as well as working. He decided not to call me until the deadline, until after the deadline. And by that time, I had already gone into what is that called? A plan B, if you will. When the actual event happened, Sam appeared, he wanted to talk, this, that, and the other. All of his people were like, let him talk. You know what I realized? We're back in the conservative playbook. Claim that you are a victim by finding out what your enemy is doing and then using it against them. So if I had invited Sam and let Sam do it as he had wanted, he would have flooded the people with all of his supporters, and we'd have had a conversation arguing back and forth about whatever names they're going to call us and whatever names we're going to holler back at them. Rather than do that, what we ended up doing was having a very spirited discussion about why people should believe that this is something to do. And the reason that it went wrong, because we were trying so hard to get something done before the Protection Act went before the City Council. The reason that it went right is because the Protection Act was stopped at that City Council meeting as a result of individuals who had not heard the argument before, having heard the argument before this event had took place. So although the means don't always justify the ends, I think that our intentions are true, and as a result, I believe in them. And in terms of how people are hurt, or if it hurt their feelings, or they thought it was wrong, let's have a conversation about that.
All right, so speaking of conversation, so kind of just on the back end of this interview, if I were to say, they want to put a marina right there, are you against that idea?
I don't know. It depends on what people talk. It depends on what I hear as people are talking about it.
So as far as commercialization goes, is there how about a water park? If I tell you right off the bat, we're gonna have a water park, 8 slides, the whole 9 yards. I need, as far as people, they're talking about privatization. They're always on the Friends of Liberty State Park. We're always on the battle against privatization. We have all these, corporate enemies and all these big investors developers, everyone always has their eyes on everything. What is acceptable commercialization in Liberty State Park, and how do we have these conversations, moving forward where all parties could be a part of it, and then instead of just shutting it down on both sides?
I think what would really help is when these things are proposed, the public is actually made aware of it. For example, when we were both doing all of that stuff with the following the city council meetings and interviewing people, running around, all of that kind of good stuff. One of the things that you would always had a problem with was the fact that when I found a story, I really stuck to just what the story was. The other stuff that I found out around it, I left it alone. And you felt that everybody should have the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Okay, fine. What I am finding in moving forward now is that if you want people to understand where you are coming from, they got to understand who you are. And who Sam is and who he claims to be have seemed to been divergent now. I thought that they were the same, but it seems to be divergent. For example, when we talk about public-private partnership, it does not necessarily mean that you destroy the environment in order to make something popular or engaging for the public. For example, there was once a time where with the Bay Watch, the people who watch the Bay, they wanted to do like a kayak tours through the marsh and had all these plans about how they could do it safely and sustainably. Sam walked out on the meeting. Now, that sort of thing, had it been made known to the public, might have been something that we could have grown on. But the bottom line was that as the largest, I guess, supporter of the park, the most vocal, the most, well-known, Sam has the ability to either help you get something done or to sick his minions on you so that everything that you do is criminalized and demonized. That's what he's done, or that has been his threat, that has been his power. The problem with doing that with me is that I'm really not interested. All of the things that he would say about me, first of all, we can prove they're not true, but it's by my record. And secondly, they distract from the subject. We have got to remediate chromium-contaminated land on 235 acres of Liberty State Park. And that is all there is. He walks out when you walk out of meetings because people just want to do something around here. When the mayor suggested recreation in the park, Sam was adamant and walked out. When we decided to, when the council decided that the Protection Act was something that they did not want to see, Sam was all I'm glad we can do it, and all of that when in public. And then he went back and told his people to get on that, so he sicked them on the people that are supporting that act, as well as our organization. Again, it's the conservative playbook. They find out what is supposed to be your strength. They pick at it. They retell the same untruths until people believe it. That's all beautiful, but actions will always speak louder than words. And if we focus our actions on the things that will actually get results, rather than all of the rigmarole that will entertain and enjoy some of the stupidity that's happening out here now, it will be successful.
I guess my final question is then, for people who don't, I guess, what is a vision of, what would be your vision to a certain extent of what a future for Liberty State Park would be that is distinctly different from Sam Pesin's vision?
Well, I would see, at least taking from the master plan, there's quite a bit of that would be applicable. But we have to consider it in terms of 21st century. So, for example, with water parks, it's cute to have water parks, but water is a precious resource. If you have a way of recycling gray water so that it is safe, and that gray water is starting out as pure or at least sanitary, and when I call it gray water, I don't mean wastewater. I mean that water that would be reused constantly, and that has to be decontaminated, particularly in a time when we got COVID. So perhaps a water park may not be the best way. But see, that is coming from the ignorance of an individual who has not worked extensively with water. And so I would be interested in hearing what people who are actually water experts would say about having a water park in the middle of all of this. I know that I know some things in terms of remediation. So I would like to see the community taught some of those things in remediation so that they could be a part of the process. I understand that there's an astronomical cost to this, but I also understand that the people who are responsible for it are also liable for that cost, and we should have the state and the local government, and as well as the federal government, align with us to actually make them do the work. Even if it were not a situation where they did the whole park, 235 acres is a lot. How much of it can we do so that it is safe for our future generations? These are questions that I don't have the capacity to answer without expert involvement and expert advice. And so when people say things like, would you be this, would you be that? Heck, if I wanted, I would, put a farm in here and have some sustainable, just about sustainable everything, so that people would have an example of what we should be doing in order to make this a great future. I would do things to bird watching that people would not believe, because quiet as it's kept, I enjoy it too. And that's why it is so offensive to me to hear this whole bird watching ploy used to not do stuff. I mean, there is absolutely no way in West Kenny that you can believe that a bird would be more comfortable in a radioactive or contaminated habitat than a regular one that's been remediated. Get the hell out of here. Come on. Why are we even pretending that that's a possibility? And so I'm not going to make the edicts about what should be and what shouldn't be in the park. What I want to see is the community involved in making those decisions, because that's who deserves to be making those decisions. I would be a part of it, not it. I'm not the decision maker. I am the arbitrator. I want to see people come in. I'm not conservative. I really am a conservator. And as a conservator, you repair, you build, you prepare for the future. You do not let something sit and rot and continue to rot, because then you and your friends get to have special events and watch a bird or two when they're in the mood. Nah, that's not the way that it works, particularly now. The status quo has been broken for a long time. It is about time that we took the stand in terms of making it better. This is the time to make it better. This is the reason. This is the project that we need to work on as a city and eventually as a state.
All right, one last final question. With Sam Pesin being expert?
That's a good point. I guess it would depend on the level of transparency he was willing to sacrifice. Because when one of the things that makes transparency trust building is the fact that you are vulnerable. You are letting people know all of your cards. And as a result of that, you do not have all of the power in a situation. And I think that if Sam were to do that with all the time that he has spent and seen around the Liberty State Park or DEP, the politicians, that's a wealth of knowledge, and it cannot be denied. What I don't think it would be is useful if he doesn't want to do that. I mean, if he's still bitter, if he is still, unsure, if he is still trying to hold on to a legacy that is no longer appropriate, well, then we'll just have to work around him. It would be a loss to have to do so, but it can be done.